What started as a little sports car company by a prisoner of war that wanted revenge from Ferrari has blossomed into one of the most profitable luxury automotive brands of all time, today worth in the neighborhood of $3 billion. This is the incredible story of the legend that is Ferruccio Lamborghini. April 28, 1916. Born a tourist to a loving family of grape farmers, Ferruccio grew up obsessed with machines. Constantly tinkering, taking things apart, and fixing things around the farm, Ferruccio was more interested in the farming machinery itself than the job the machines were designed to do. But his mother and father Evelina and Antonio hoped young Ferruccio would take over the family business. But his passion and mechanical mindedness took him elsewhere. He began studies in Bologna for mechanical engineering until 1940, when he'd be drafted into the Italian Royal Air Force to serve as a mechanic. When his superiors realized his mechanical prowess, he was sent to the Greek island of Rhodes to supervise the repairs and maintenance of military trucks and tractors. In 1943, Italy's armistice agreement was signed, effectively ending their involvement in the war, and the Italian troops were evicted. However, Lamborghini decided to stay and instead open his own workshop. Trouble was, in 1945, the British took over the island and took everyone on it as prisoners. Ferruccio found himself a prisoner of war and was locked away for an entire year. And he was forced to keep the remaining equipment running despite a complete lack of resources. But all that time locked away, hobbling together broken down tractors with spare parts from broken down trucks, boats, and whatever he could lay his hands on, gave him an idea. See, Italy's economy lay broken. Post-war, the country's production of everything had ground to a halt. Cities were bombed, unemployment was rampant, and the lira had completely collapsed. Prices of goods were at an all-time high because supply was at an all-time low. There wasn't even enough food to go around. In an effort to stay above water, the government started liquidating everything they could for just pennies on the dollar. And that included military equipment. Ferruccio knew that you couldn't rebuild an economy while people were literally starving, so he got to work on making a more powerful, more reliable, cheaper version of one of the most important inventions of the modern world. But Lamborghini didn't have the cash or tooling like Fiat or Landini did. So, with his knowledge and experience of all those now ridiculously affordable machines, he was able to harvest them for parts and start building his first few Carioca tractors from scraps. And the first machines adorned with the Raging Bull emblem were born. They were cheaper to buy and way more powerful. He hosted tractor pulling competitions where different brand tractors were tied together and would face off in a mechanical tug-of-war, in which the Lamborghinis always won. But what really set him apart was their ability to run on diesel. Ferruccio had designed and developed the Lamborghini fuel atomizer, which allowed the engine to be started with gasoline and then switch over and run on the much cheaper and more efficient diesel fuel. Suddenly, a Lamborghini became the obvious choice. They'd outwork all the rest and use less fuel at a fraction of the price. In just a few years' time, demand was so high that the small company, which started out building a single tractor every week, was forced to find a way to quadruple their output. Business was booming. Lamborghini needed a bigger factory, so he convinced his parents to leverage their home and literally bet the farm on his ability to help shape the modern world. While tractor sales were exploding, Ferruccio never stopped tinkering, innovating, and inventing. With the loss of his first wife and mother of his first child, he buried himself in his work. And with the cash he'd made building mechanical oxen, he developed heating systems and electrically powered air conditioners for people's homes. As the world marched into the swinging 60s, with the success of selling essentials like tractors and luxuries like air conditioners, Ferruccio Lamborghini found himself labeled an absolute industrial magnate. And with all that success came more money than he knew what to do with. Soon, he was splurging on fine watches, fine wine, and even finer cars. Cars from Jaguar, Mercedes-Benz, Maserati, Aston Martin, and Ferrari. His love for the automobile was unwavering, and while proud of his achievements, and maybe even more so of his cars, he found flaws in every one of them. Most notably, his beloved Ferrari 250 GT, which he said was too harsh, too unforgiving, a race car adapted for the road. And then there was the clutch. He could never seem to get it to behave. It was too loud, too heavy, and made the car virtually impossible to drive smoothly. And after he paid Ferrari over 1,000 lira to fix it, more than once, he decided to take a peek at it himself. What he found was that it was the same clutch used in his tractors, a part he knew all too well cost around $10. And since old man Ferrari wouldn't respond to his letters, he decided to stop by. Visiting the factory in Modena, Enzo brushed off Ferruccio as a nobody, and when Lamborghini stopped him to confront the car's shortcomings, so the story goes, Ferruccio explained that the clutch was too easily broken. But rather than just criticize, he offered a solution to make it last longer. Enzo responded with, "Let me make the cars, you stick to making the trattori." Other versions of the story claim Enzo said that the problem was not with the car, but with the driver. Mr. Lamborghini went home furious. Just 4 months later, spurred on by the insult, a small car factory was built in San Agata. With the help of 5 disgruntled ex-Ferrari employees, Lamborghini had a car ready in just 120 days. Enter the 350 GTV, adorned with that signature tourist badge and a model number that was 100 more than you got with a Ferrari. The car debuted in the 1953 Turin Motor Show. Response to the concept was so great that Lamborghini received 13 orders for one almost immediately. It was a stunning, lightweight, beautifully made Grand Tourer, boasting a 270 horsepower, 3.5-liter V12 under the hood. That was mated to a 5-speed transmission, meaning it was able to hit 60 miles an hour in just 6.8 seconds and go on to a top speed of 158. 120 cars were built in total, which today are virtually priceless. And while Lamborghini's new car company was small, like a horsefly, the Italian steed couldn't help but take notice. Over the next few years, the 350 GT was reworked and upgraded. Tweaks to the engine, refinements to the suspension, a 2+2 version with a revised roofline. And while that car was a technical success for Lamborghini, it was the car being built behind the scenes, hidden from Ferruccio, that was about to change the world. Inspired by the GT40, a small group of young engineers obsessed with motorsport were secretly developing what we know today as the world's first supercar. An aerospace chassis 2,900-pound machine with a transversely mounted V12 capable of anywhere from 320 to 385 horsepower, depending on which engineer you ask. All bolted right to your spine. The sprint to 60 took just 5.5 seconds, and at 168 miles an hour, it was crowned the fastest car in the world. With a body sculpted by a just 27-year-old Marcello Gandini, it set the earth on fire. Once Ferruccio found out about the project, he was adamantly opposed to building it. He didn't want to build race cars. He'd been there and done that, notably with a Fiat Topolino that he ultimately crashed. But when the checks started coming in, he couldn't deny a car like this was great publicity. So it was greenlit for production. However, Ferruccio was growing old, growing tired, and Automobili Lamborghini simply wasn't profitable. So he turned operations of the entire company over to assistant engineer Paolo Stenzani. With Stenzani at the wheel, we'd see cars like the Islero, the Espada, the Jarama, and the Iraqo roll out of the factory. But the car that really burned the brand into our hearts and ruined all our parents' drywall was the Countach. Countach sparked a passion for the raging bull that's more alive than ever to this day. But passion alone doesn't pay the bills, and Lamborghini, due largely in part to the oil embargo and stock market crash, was unable to stay solvent. Ferruccio sold Lamborghini Trattori in its entirety, and half his shares in Automobili Lamborghini. Ultimately, the company was forced into liquidation. Just a few years later, the Italian government sold the brand for just $3 million to a couple of French billionaires who also couldn't make it work. Lamborghini traded hands to Chrysler, who then sold it to the Indonesian company Megatech, who then sold it to the conglomerate Sedco. But in 1998, when Volkswagen's Audi group was approached by Lamborghini to source engines for an upcoming baby Diablo, Audi declined the deal, and instead of selling them engines, they bought the company instead. Unfortunately, Ferruccio Lamborghini wouldn't live long enough to see his car company flourish into the absolute powerhouse it is today. With cars like the Murcielago, Gallardo, Huracan, Aventador, and even the Urus, his famous quote, "You buy a Ferrari when you want to be somebody. You buy a Lamborghini when you are somebody," is perhaps more true today than ever. And with a recent statement from the company stating, "Now is not the time for an electric supercar," the true spirit of Ferruccio Lamborghini and the Raging Bull lives on. Thank you all for watching. If you like stories like these, go check out the story of Lexus right over on the side there. Or maybe check out the story of Yamaha. We'll see you all next time here on Ideal.